Hello! On this episode of Dungeons & Die Rolls, I'm going to give you my review of The Reckoners. The Reckoners is a cooperative board game that had a Kickstarter last year, some release at Gen Con, and I just got my copy in this week. It's based on a series of novels by Brandon Sanderson, which I think are fantastic, personally. The premise is 10 years ago, a new star appeared explosively in the sky, and all around the world, people started developing superpowers. Unfortunately, all of these epics, as they're called, are evil. And so the world became overthrown by supervillains. And the high epics, the most powerful, divvied up the civilized territory amongst themselves, and they have lesser epics that work for them as bodyguards, keeping day-to-day routines going, enforcement of laws, things like that. The Reckoners are a human resistance movement trying to overthrow the regime of the epics. And this game focuses on the first book in the series with the titular character Steelheart and trying to take him out in the city of Nukago. Just a preface for the rest of the video, this is going to be a review video. It is not going to be a rules tutorial. I will talk through some of the gameplay so that you get a feeling of what it's like to go through the game, but this is not going to be a replacement or a substitute for you going through and learning the rules on your own. The first thing that I have to say, just on first blush with the box cover, and then as I went through, which you can see in my unboxing video, the components in this are just fantastic. They are top-notch. Everything is high quality. The molded plastic inserts that are used for the entirety of gameplay are awesome. The dice and cards are of high quality, and I'm going to show you all of this in a minute when I'm done talking and I turn it around so you can see the setup on the table. The one thing that I will mention is the rule book is pretty good. I know, usually I say the one thing I will mention is that the rulebook is garbage. It's not. It's good. I like that they're smarter than some things. They do have a components list. I don't know how or why people are still making board games that don't have a components list in there. There are a couple of places in here where things are not as clear as they could be. Nothing that I couldn't figure out, as in I feel confident that I am playing it the right way, but just a couple of things that are out of order or not clearly explained that I feel would have been solved by blind playtesting. You know, hand the game to a bunch of people who haven't played it, don't teach them, say learn from the rule book and play. For the biggest example of this is the boss epic, which in this case is Steelheart, has a power board. What's it called? It's a power board and an adjustment board. I don't actually know which is which. I think I know, but every time that they are referred to in the rulebook, including in the components list, they're always right next to each other, and it says adjustment board and power board. I think that reading and looking from left to right, the adjustment board is on the left and the power board's on the right, but it does matter a little bit during setup, and they never actually tell you clearly this is this component. So, you know, how did that vagueness get out? But for the most part, the rules are very straightforward. The pages are well laid out with lots of illustrated examples of everything. Very clear, very easy to understand what you're doing, and with the exception of a couple of things that are in a weird ordering, it's very easy to look up, and once you know what you're doing, the reference cards will take you through the game. Here we have a sample setup for a 3-player game of the Reckoners. Each part of the board for the players or for the game comes in these awesome plastic trays inset for cardboard and components to go on top. I love that these are so functional, and of course they're configured to stack and fit inside the box, so taking the game out and putting it away is really just as easy as lifting each piece out and putting it wherever you're going. So the pertinent parts of the play area is each player has their own playing board. There's a shared playing board that has some of the stats for the Reckoners as a group. And then there are 4 city locations, which is going to depend on player count, as well as Steelheart's board in the center of it. Each city location is ruled by its own epic. Now, one of the premises from the novels is kind of riffed off of Superman, which is every epic, no matter how strong or weak, has a particular weakness that completely negates all of their powers. The problem is that weakness can be anything. It can be a physical situation, it can be material, it can be a state of mind, so it's extremely difficult to try to figure out what an epic's weakness is. And a big theme of the book is collecting research on all the epics, trying to deduce their weakness so that they can be overpowered. That's represented in the game by all epics having a research and a health value and corresponding tracks on the city locations. For many epics, they have superpowers, but they're vulnerable just like people are. So researching them is optional. In those cases, if you research them completely, it will automatically lower their health to a predefined value, always corresponding to the amount of research you did. So in this case, he takes 3 research to weaken him, and that immediately lowers his health to 4, which is 3 beneath his starting value of 7. It does not do that much damage. So if you hit him for 1 damage before doing the research, that damage would be effectively wasted as he goes from 6 to 4. So in cases like this, the research is optional. It's completely possible to simply attack him outright and do tons of damage and kill him off. However, some epics have superpowers that make them invulnerable to normal attack. And so you can see on the card and on the board that they start with a research value and infinite health, so they cannot be physically attacked. In these cases, you must research the epic, and once they become weakened from your research, then the health goes onto the board, usually at a pretty low value to finish them off. Also found on each epic card is a track that shows the actions they take when they activate. And I think this is pretty cool because you have these brackets that indicate what actions are going to happen. And during the course of the game, if an epic stays out on the table, their track is going to increase, so they're doing more and more when they activate. However, you can take actions as a player to decrease that track, always all the way down to its minimum. So you're limiting the bad stuff that they do. Each of these epics also gives you a reward collectively for taking them out, and it helps you to take on Steelheart. Steelheart works just like the rest of them, just more so. He has 4 action tracks that get activated in sequence, and then he also has to be researched fully before he can be attacked at all. He has a huge research track, which is decreased by the rewards every time you kill one of his lesser epics. Once his research track is depleted, you replace that entire side of the board with a health track, which you then have to deplete through attacking him in order to win the game. Each player is going to have their own personal board with a character that they've chosen. That character comes with 3 character-specific dice, and everyone's going to get 3 generic dice also. The character also comes with a corresponding ability card, and of course their own miniature. Both the ability card and the character dice add uniqueness to the characters, but not in a way that forces you to do specific things. For example, Megan has a character ability that can give her extra green skulls, but her dice give her extra red badges. So when you're playing the character, you do feel like you are playing in a unique way compared to the rest of the table, but you're not forced into focusing and specializing and just doing one particular thing like you are in some cooperative games with character roles. You also have one of these plan tokens, and I'm going to just quickly mention the very cool components in this, where I got the deluxe version, and a lot of the components, such as these plan tokens and all of the health and research markers, these all got upgraded to metal, and it looks really neat on the table and feels nice in your hand, gives things a good heft. It's a pretty cool little upgrade. The one thing that I don't love is that these dice are really big. They're much larger than they need to be in order to clearly see the icons, and having 6 of these or more if you get upgrades can actually be a little cumbersome to roll it all at once. The group board consists of tracking the population, which is the loss condition for the game. Starts at 40, and Steelheart, when he activates, always one of his things is to always move against the population, and then many of the other epics do also. The game manual calls them attacking the population, which is, in the novels, it's really described as popular support for what the Reckoners are doing, where most people who are alive agree in general principles that the way the epics behave and them ruling over humanity is a bad thing generally, but everyone's adapted to it and they're used to living that way, and they're not really sure that it's worth rocking the boat and facing possible repercussions just for the seemingly impossible task of trying to overthrow these epics. So in the book, this is really portrayed as more of popular support. And if they're concerned about if the popular support runs out, then people are going to dislike the Reckoners more than they dislike Steelheart. And so that's what you're working against. You're trying to not let the population track run down. The center here, this is a little tiered structure that represents the various epics searching for the mini bases, temporary bases, and cells of the Reckoners. And every time they find one of the players has to lose a die. They can be bought back later, but it's going to reduce your effectiveness on your turn. And then there's a track to keep track of how much money you have. It starts with 4, and the game starts with an initial purchase round. And there are these item cards that come up front. And they do lots of neat things to the game, from getting an extra die, to once around special actions, to letting you swap die symbols and things like that. And specific players can purchase those cards and just use those abilities for the rest of the game. The way that the players play is they take all of their dice and they roll them, and it's a Yahtzee style system where you can have up to 3 rolls, and each roll you have to lock at least one of your dice. So you would take one, and there are even nice little inset things in here, so that one is locked in place. I could add more if I want to. Cool, so I kept those on my first roll. And then I'm gonna roll again. And I have to keep at least one more thing. So I'm gonna keep one more thing. And then I could roll a third time. I could just keep all of the choices however you like. Once everyone's done that and finalized their choices, then they're going to be using their dice. And this is not in a turn order. Everyone's playing communally. So you can you can resolve the die faces in any order that's most beneficial for everyone. And the die faces will do research on the epics to reduce that track. They'll do damage to the epics to reduce that track. They can contain the epics to reduce their action track. They can take off these little enforcement guys who are humans that are working as law enforcement for Steelheart. And what they do is any of those guys left at the end of a round bump that epic's action track up more for every enforcement mini that's still there. So they don't do anything against the Reckoners directly in terms of ending the game, so it can be tempting to kind of leave them on the board while you focus on other things. But if you let them pile up, then you're going to get an epic that comes out to the city, and all of a sudden his action track just jumps all the way up, and he's doing tons of terrible things. Your dice can earn money for your base, get you more plan tokens, allow you to move from city location to city location. Incidentally, check out these minis. Like, as I throw them on the table, and they're really awesome. Super cool. I don't know that I'm going to bother actually doing it because I have enough games that I paint, but they're definitely begging for some paint. One thing, just a little niggling thing, they have these plastic rings that you snap on so that you can keep track of which mini is yours without having to look at the sculpt. And that's good. But for some reason, the plastic that these guys are kept in, the little plastic case, is just too small to allow you to keep the ring on there. So you have to pop the stupid thing off every time you're going to put the game away. I have no idea what the reasoning was, and there's a separate slot for you to put the rings in. I have no idea what the reasoning was for that. The same character always uses the same color because it's associated with their player board. So I don't know why they didn't just make the storage so that the rings stay on the minis all the time. Regardless, it's a small enough concern. It takes a few seconds. It's just an annoying thing that I've noticed. After everyone's taken all their actions, you go around the table starting with where Steelheart happens to be, and all of those epics resolve their action tracks, and they will reduce population for the Reckoners. They will increase Steelheart's action tracks. They will put out barricades like this to prevent movement between the city locations. They'll put out more enforcement, things like that. They'll look for the Reckoner's base. And once all of the epics have activated, then Steelheart goes, and he has 4 tracks that do all of those things also. Herding population, looking for the base, putting out new enforcement, and dropping barricades. And it's just a race for you against all of these things. There are always going to be more city locations than there are players, so trying to manage multiple locations worth of epics before they do terrible things to you is a thing, as is trying, of course, to actually progress against Steelheart. And that gets a little bit more difficult in the second half of the game, because when you're defeating these local epics, all of them have part of their reward is research against Steelheart. So you can cruise through the first half of the game and just let the research against him come from beating up these guys, and you're progressing. But then when he's fully researched and he goes over to health, you don't get any benefit from that part of it. You'll still get the lesser reward that they all have also, and it's necessary to take them out to prevent some of the bad things that they do. but they no longer help you directly against Steelheart once he goes to health. And so you have to find that sweet spot in the game where you say, okay, we're going to start getting hammered by this, but we have to ignore some of the bad things that these other guys are doing in order to actually focus on taking out Steelheart's health and taking him out of the game. So that's how the Reckoners works. I am very pleased with this game personally, and I've played it with 3 other people that I've taught, and it's gotten good reception so far. A couple of them immediately wanted to play it twice in a row. I like the theme of it. I think is represented well. I think that the degree of cooperation is good. I like that your characters feel unique, but they don't shoehorn you into doing specific things on your turn. And I like that it's fast playing. It's a big box, and as you can see, there's lots of stuff in there, but that's really because there's no, folding boards and stuff of cards that you have to spread out and assemble. You're just picking this stuff out of the box and plopping it, and that's your play area. So while it takes up a big box and a fair amount of space, it's a pretty fast playing game, and your decisions should be fast on your turn. And there was room for more of that in my collection. I have a number of cooperative things that I've gotten recently that are longer, more strategic, in-depth games. And those are fun, but you want to have some things also that are, this is just kind of fast and fun, and we hammer it out in an hour, I think. I didn't really track stuff because all the games so far have also been teaching games for me, but it's pretty fast playing, especially once you've played it for a few rounds and you know what the dice do, and you're looking at the state of the board and recognizing things, and you know what you need to do on your turn. So I really like the Reckoners. I definitely recommend it if you like cooperative games, if you like the books, and I recommend the books too if you haven't read them, if you like fantasy things, if you like superheroes. I would say even if you're not into superheroes but you enjoy fantasy stuff, it's worth trying at least the first book, Steelheart, because the way that he approaches it is from a very I like the way that he has strict rules governing the powers and the classifications of epics, and how things work is very very thought out and logically defined, and I like that kind of thing. So hopefully you got an idea of what the game is like and you enjoyed watching the video. Please like it, share it, subscribe to my channel so that you'll see more games in the future, and happy gaming.